This video is sponsored by my visceral hatred for the YouTube algorithm, and we will talk about race swapping in films and arts in general. And do you want to open up?
Okay, so maybe we should start first with a sort of definition for race swapping, although I don't think there's anybody who doesn't know what it means or can't grasp it from the context, but...
Yeah, but there's still differences in understanding.
Still differences. Okay, so race swapping or race bending, that's an alternative variant. It's when directors or film studios take I'm talking about in cinema right now. Maybe later we can talk about the arts.
Okay.
But in cinema, it's when directors or film studios take a popular character from a book or possibly a movie franchise and then pick an actor from a different race or ethnicity or sometimes gender to play it. And something interesting I actually found out is that race bending, this is the original term. So race swapping came later, but race bending actually was coined in 2009 as a term of protest because in 2009 there was an adaptation being made for the Avatar The Last Airbender series. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard about it, yeah.
Yeah, so basically the main characters in the series are East Asian.
Avatar The Last Race Bender. I'm sorry.
The Last Race Bender. Well, no, it was only the beginning. So, the characters were originally East Asian, Inuit, but in the movie or the series, they were played by European actors or actors of European descent. Mm-hmm. And so fans were very angry at this decision, and that's why they coined the term race bending, from the airbender,
So I was right, actually.
Yeah, you were right. Yeah, this is exactly why they called it race bending, and I didn't know that. I thought it was an organically coined term. I mean, just it appeared in the discussions of these type of films, but as it turns out, it was coined very intentionally.
I thought you were going to say that race bending is some kind of a lesser form of race swapping.
No. It's actually, from what I've gathered, it's the original term. And then I think race swapping, maybe it's easier to say. I don't know. I haven't really researched why race bending gave way to race swapping as a term. But yeah, this is the backstory, so a little bit of context.
Okay.
And so maybe here we should talk a bit about race as a construct. So I'm going to start out with the fact that race biologically does not really matter. It is mainly, again, I cannot really back it up scientifically, but from what I know...
Just to point this out, we are not academics.
In no way, yeah.
We are pop culture nerds.
Absolutely.
And we are speaking about this in that context. Whoever doesn't want to deal with it, fine.
Yeah, very well said. And so what I mean is race is basically determined. I hope I'm not saying something very stupid right now, but...
It's okay.
Yeah, race is basically determined by, in a way, the geographical locations, because if you're living, for instance, in a very hot climate with a very strong sun, then you have more melanin in your skin.
Yeah, and the opposite version of this is, for example, if you live in the Antarctic, it's going to be like, your skin is going to be, as they say here in Bulgaria, as white as the Pope's ass.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that is why this is strictly geographical. It should not have had any bearing on culture and social relations and so on. But as it turns out, and as we now know, race is a very contentious issue. And actually, very early on, I think, at least in comparatively modern history, race pretty much determined the ways people interacted with each other. So America, of course, is a very good example because
it's a shithole country.
Yeah, and from very early on, people were segregated.
Yeah.
And this creates this really unequal dynamic, which, even though it is now in the past, technically speaking...
Or is it?
Or is it? Yeah, it continues to show up in different forms. And although at a surface glance, things are so much better now, this is such a deep-rooted issue in their history that they cannot escape from it. So basically, to sum it up, race should not be a social issue or a cultural issue.
But it is because people are stupid.
Absolutely. This is the whole problem of people.
Yeah, I mean,
You can sum it up like that.
it is a kind of, at least as far as I know, an evolutional quality that we've developed as means of preservation of the self. You are naturally predisposed to be defensive and maybe on the attack towards anything that looks visually different and maybe behaves differently, because you might have, let's say, a person of color.
Yeah.
And people are biased toward them. You have a person who is gay, and people are biased toward them. You have people of different religions. Let's say people are biased against, Americans are biased against Muslims or whatever. Anything that's different, you are naturally predisposed to be against it, at least initially. And then if you have some kind of an IQ, at least a little bit of an IQ, if you're not a complete, total fucking asshole, you will be able to overcome this evolutionary doorstep within yourself to be able to realize that these differences are just superficial.
Absolutely. You put it very nicely. It's an evolutionary doorstep, and this is instinct. So you could say that xenophobia at the initial level, it's not a bad thing. It's just instinctual. It's just, as you said, you're afraid of the other, the different, because whatever is different and unknown might pose danger. So your primordial brain decides to tell you, okay, keep away, because this might be dangerous. This might get us, unalived. So it took me a second, but I was able to stop myself. This is simply my regards to the algorithm. So
I was gonna say that, like, in the past, I was like way more aggressive when it comes to treating the people who have this kind of bias. I was always like getting aggressive toward them. I was always ready to destroy them, no matter if it was about racism or homophobia or whatever it is. I was always ready to fucking wreck them. At this point in life, I've realized the thing that I mentioned about this being inherent in people because of evolution, to be kind of on the run from something that's different. I don't have a problem with this because I understand evolution. What I have a problem with is if you're stupid enough to not be able to overcome this.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you a personal example of mine, because I'm gay. I still have this, by the way. In a way, I still have, I for sure had it before. I think I still have it now because I catch myself experiencing it from time to time. I have a little bit of an internalized homophobia. My daddy issues, whatever. The point is that sometimes, even nowadays, I feel myself to be like a little bit stung on the inside when I meet a gay guy who's like effeminate. Because I feel like, these fucking like F words or whatever. Given that I'm gay myself and I shouldn't have a problem with this, and morally and philosophically, psychologically now, I like to feel I don't. I still feel a tinge within me whenever I meet them. But the thing is, I'm working on it. I realize that it's a problem. I'm smart enough to realize that this is something that I should not have. And that's the point. This is why I feel good about myself, because of the fact that I realize it and I'm working on it. What I cannot understand, what I cannot accept is people who don't work on it and who keep being assholes, basically.
I absolutely agree with you. And this is what I think, what you've described, you just went through the whole process. So at the first, initially, you were very defensive against people who are very quick to judge, on by whatever principle or context, because you've actually been subjected in a way, even without explicitly stating that you're gay, you were subjected to these type of judgments. You were constantly hearing them. You were growing up with them. So this, of course, explains the internalized homophobia, because when you're raised in a certain setting, and unfortunately in Bulgaria, even now, it's
not
better.
Accepted. It's better, but it's still horrible.
It's not accepted, and there are all these very, very harmful and awful stereotypes, and so it's very normal for you to have this part, and now it's up to you to work with yourself so that you can overcome it. But what I meant to say was, it is normal. I think this is very important, to not jump on one end or the other, when you're dealing with these type of issues, because, if you're very quick to judge people who, for instance, show some tinge of xenophobia or some tinge of racism at first, you don't give them a chance. So maybe these people are just absolutely acting on instinct, and when they have a little bit of time to reconsider, they can actually make up their mind and be more accepting, or even to change their perspective and gain a new understanding of whatever issue is at hand. So what I'm saying is that people should not be too quick to label other people as racists or whatever else it is, because actually this is counterproductive to the main goal of making people more open-minded. Because as you said, when people act on their instinct at first, they might react, in a negative way, but then they can change their minds and actually learn more, accept, and over time this may change the general culture or the general mood of the public. But at the same time, as you said, if, somebody reacts that way and then does not see a problem with it and continues more and more and more, this person is a moron.
Also, what you mentioned about taking the time to not judge people instantly and seeing if they have like the chance of to change or whatever. Mm-hmm. It really depends, at least for me, on the type of person we're talking about. Because if they are just, kind of ignorant, not very fiery about their racism or whatever, but just need to be educated, it might be good if you take the time, if you invest the time to try and persuade them otherwise. But having this in mind, there's this other type of people who are just way too far gone. Complete fucking trash. And you should never, because this was me before. Not only was I aggressive, but I was aggressive about trying to change even the biggest piece of shit that I come across. Nowadays, no. If someone is a complete moron or the worst case of a racist or whatever it is, just tell them to fuck off and move on. Not everybody is worth your time. Some people are just too far gone. And if you can't change them, and if there's still people out there like this, because there will always be, that's okay.
Yeah, tell them fuck off.
Yeah, you can just live with it, because no matter what you try to do, there's always going to be people who hate you.
Oh, yeah.
Personally, hate you societally or whatever it is. You can't do anything about it. Just live your life and be happy. And the best thing to do in this case is, I think this was a quote from Marcus Aurelius, be like a rock against the waves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And when it comes to far gone people, usually they're pretty easy to spot from the beginning.
Yeah. Not always.
Not always, but most of the time they're not really, secretive about their hatred. So it's very easy to spot them. And of course, it's a waste of time to try and change them because, as you said, they're so far gone on this path. You have the upbringing and then the content they have consumed for years and years. And so there's nothing to do there. But I'm talking about giving people a chance because, I think it's a very interesting dynamic when you are different by some standard, whether it be sexual orientation, whether it be race, whether it be disability, whatever it is. People constantly judge you in different ways, and sometimes even when they're well-meaning, they still are offensive to you because they don't really take the time to understand what you're going through. And so I think that when you've experienced this for a certain amount of time, you become just like them. And you become just as judgy because that's all you've received. And instinctively, you're thinking, okay, when they're not giving him a chance, why should I give anybody a chance? Nobody did that for me. Why should I? And this actually solidifies the problem. And so that's why I think we should give some grace to people who are just ignorant. Yeah,
you should, no matter how difficult it seems, you should try to break this vicious circle of hate and the will for vengeance, so to speak. Because if we are not the ones to try and break it, nobody else will.
This is very true. And also, I've read that about anger, but I think it's the same with hatred because hatred is very much based or related to anger. Anger always incites and breeds more anger. And the same is with hate. And I'm not trying to say, I'm not trying to make a reference to Jesus and say, oh, just turn the other cheek,
Yeah, by the way,
this is not what I mean.
We also have to stress this because I found this in my life. You should try to be as forgiving as you can. You should try to be as nice as you can and understanding as you can to try and have patience with people. But at the same time, it's really, really not healthy for you to completely discard your dark side.
No.
Do you know how fucking amazing I felt when I've shat on people who offended me? If someone is a loser or a fucking piece of shit on purpose and without remorse, you can fucking destroy them, and that's okay.
Yes, because it is justified.
Yeah.
I'm all about, being reciprocal with people. So if somebody is acting nicely towards you, there's no reason for you to be rude, to hate him, to shit on him, as you said, verbally, and so on. But of course, if somebody is not treating you properly, you have every right to stand for yourself.
Yeah. I'm never an asshole without reason, but when they do give me the reason, I'm a monster and I fucking enjoy it. Anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, so another consideration that we should put out, or maybe like a disclaimer, is that we're both from Bulgaria, or in a larger context from Eastern Europe. And we have a very different understanding of racism than, for instance, people in America. Because we don't have that cultural baggage of being oppressed, for instance. I mean, of course, there's racism in Bulgaria too, with our Romani population.
Gypsies.
The Gypsies minority. But generally, it's very one-on-one. So there are the Bulgarians and the Gypsies. And you could also argue for example, the Turkish minority or the Bulgarian-Turkish people.
Yeah.
But overall race was never a central issue in our country and in Eastern Europe.
We should add though, so the American type of racism is not a central issue in our country because people haven't experienced it. But I have noticed that when they do experience it, let's say a person of color comes over, let's say a black person from the US or maybe a Chinese person comes, there is racism. I can tell you that.
There is racism, but it's actually not so much racism, but xenophobia.
Yeah.
Which ties in with what we previously spoke about, because it's something different. And this was very clear and very apparent at the beginning when more people of color started coming into Bulgaria. I remember a time where it was very rare to see a black person in Sofia, for instance. And when you actually see one, you were very shocked and you were looking at him not because you're opposed to him or her being black, but because it was something new. So outlandish, so new to our country. And of course, during Soviet era, there were people of color, especially black people or, people from African countries in general, they were coming here to study.
They were?
Yeah, they were. Actually, I've heard about my mother-in-law and father-in-law. They had black colleagues. So, yeah.
In Soviet Bulgaria, wow.
Yeah, that was a thing. But in general, after the Soviet bloc fell, this was not very common here. So it took a certain period of, adjustment.
Yeah.
Until people just accepted that this is normal, common, and it happens. And then you have the xenophobia, as we spoke about, that it's not because the person is black, for instance. It's because he's different.
Yeah.
This is why when we are talking about race in this video, you should keep in mind that even though we were exposed from an early age to American pop culture and all of these influences, our understanding is a little bit different. And so there are some concepts which are very hard to grasp for us. And I'm going to give you an example. When I researched this topic, I found the concept of color blindness. The idea is that color blindness is when you pretend that race doesn't matter. Everybody is equal, everything is fine, and so on. And to me, that sounded positive because I was thinking, okay, so for instance, black people in America, they were fighting to be equal, to have equal rights. So on a surface level, okay, if we're not considering race, we're just treating everybody just as people, that should be a good thing. That should be what these people were fighting for.
Yeah.
All of these years. At the same time, it turns out that color blindness is perceived very negatively in America because they see it as a way of erasing history and erasing the identity of these people. And also...
It's the Karens complaining that they're getting wiped out.
Absolutely. And from my perspective, it's very hard to understand. And they are speaking about, I think it was a study which I read, and they were talking about color blindness, and then they were giving the alternative, which is color consciousness. But to me, I don't really get this. Because to me, either you accept that race doesn't matter, because it really doesn't matter, and you move on, or you're focused on race, which again brings segregation and brings all of these other negative things with it.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for me. I mean, maybe people can explain it to me in the comments, but
I can explain it to you. They have this conspiracy, the far right in the US have this conspiracy theory that it's called the white replacement theory or something like this. And it's basically, they think there's a huge conspiracy theory for black people to erase white people.
Oh, I don't think, I mean, I can definitely see how they have this conspiracy. But what I think is that there is a balance, okay? So, okay, if we look at things as a spectrum, okay, we have the far left, which are saying white people are trash. White people are terrible. They're all guilty of everything bad that happened in the world.
They're not saying this.
No, I'm talking about the far left, and I've seen people on the far left saying this. I'm not talking about the left in general. I'm just talking about extremists, like, extremists on the right.
Yeah, but
I've seen this type. Of course, I absolutely get it. I'm not saying that this is true, and I'm not saying that some of these things might very well be propaganda from the right, trying to make the left out.
Exactly.
At the same time, I've seen these type of sentiments that white people in general, and I've seen this in social media as well. White people in general, even white people from different cultures, for instance, people from Eastern Europe, have some ingrained guilt against people of color, which is very strange to me because how can I be guilty for the oppression of black people in America when I've never been a part of their culture and I've never even lived in the same geographical region? So there's that end of the spectrum where there is this, even in a way, revisionist idea that everything should be made to compensate, black people for what they went through. This is one end. On the other end, you have the idea that black people in America are living so well right now, and they're so on top of everything that they're going to erase white people, which is ridiculous, of course. This is, to me, both ends of the spectrum sound ridiculous. And I think maybe it would be most beneficial to have a balanced view, because on one instance, okay, of course, there is this history, there is this emotional baggage of oppression, of injustice. And this should be corrected. And there should be more representation, absolutely. But does that mean that every movie or every book or whatever it is in the art sphere should be about representation, should be about politics and social issues? Because I think this is taking something good, because these people really need more representation. And I'm not only talking about black people, we've mentioned black people a lot so far, but that concerns all people of color. So it's also Asian people, Native American people. Yeah. They need more representation. But, and this is something I want to talk about a bit later, but are we doing them a service? Are we doing them justice by actually taking this idea of representation, mass producing it so that people generally, and okay, let's say white people, are getting sicker and sicker of it because it's shoved down their throats constantly? Is this working?
How productive is it?
How productive it is? Is it working to greater diversity, greater tolerance and acceptance? Or is it making the opposite? And I think if you look at politics right now, at the rise of extremist right political parties, you can see that this is not working. And they are using it as a weapon. They're using it as a weapon against, the left and even just, rational, normal people.
Yeah, this is basically the problem of being, quote unquote, woke.
Absolutely.
The wokeism or whatever.
But I see a problem on both sides.
Yeah, you could argue about how productive it is. And the problem is, if you want to see how productive it is, them being politically correct in movies.
I'm the right person to talk about this. My MA thesis was on political correctness.
Oh, that's right. Okay. You could argue how productive it is because, on the one hand, if you can't alter people's opinions through general entertainment, how else can you do it?
Oh, no, I'm not saying not using this medium.
And on the other hand, not on the other hand, but additionally, just because people, right-wing morons online, are very loud, that doesn't mean that they're the bigger part of the population or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I assure you, even across America, the majority of people are like nice, democratic, tolerant people who don't care about this.
Mm-hmm.
Only the ones who are like fanatically right-wing and online screech about this all the time. It's every time this, let's say a new Disney film comes out with like, I don't know, a Black Mermaid or whatever, or
I want to talk about that too.
a Black Snow White. It's like we have a similar situation in Bulgaria with our fascistic far-right political parties and them seemingly gaining an audience, but it only seems so online. When you walk around the streets, there's almost no people who are going to be like this big of a piece of shit or whatever. So I think maybe you can make the case that statistically it may be working. Because when a movie like, let's say, The Little Mermaid comes out with a Black mermaid in it, if you take your child and sit it in front of the TV to watch this fucking movie, it's not going to say anything. It won't mind one fucking bit about the mermaid being black. It's the adults who have the problem.
Yes, but this ties in with actually something else I wanted to say. So, according to you, in your opinion, this actually is productive.
Yeah,
but
and necessary.
To that, I would say, but is it really? Because is it this type of constant race swapping? Is this the thing that makes people on the street being nice and just not being hateful towards people of color? Or are generally people like that? And this only serves to stir the extremist minorities who are most vocal on the internet.
It does both. It both sharpens the resistance of the conservatives and also affects, at least I think, people who are not so tolerant to become a little bit more conscious about it and maybe try to shut up, even if they feel the urge to be racist. I think it kind of makes them feel guilty, so to speak. And this is where, the white guilt comes into place. I'm not saying that you should have this sense of historical flagellation, self-flagellation. Acknowledge history, teach history, but do not be sorry for something that people like a century ago did and that you have nothing to do with personally. It's fine, just acknowledge it. Don't feel guilty yourself. But if you have a little bit at least a little bit of racist tendencies and you see a Black mermaid in it and it makes you feel like, I don't like it, but maybe I shouldn't say anything about it. I think this is good. It gives them some kind of a little bit of, I was going to say class consciousness, race consciousness.
Race consciousness, but actually I really wanted to talk about the Black Mermaid example. This film came out in 2023, I think, and it, of course, stirred, very big discussions. And again, we can look at it on a surface level. On a surface level, Disney is doing great. So, okay, we hear you. You want more representation. We don't really have Black princesses or Black characters apart from Tiana in The Princess and the Frog. So, we hear you and we give you a Black mermaid. And on the surface level, it's a very positive thing. It shows progress. It shows some kind of change in big studios like Disney. It also gives children, because in one of the articles I've read, there was this very poignant and sweet moment described where on TikTok parents were filming their kids, I'm talking about Black parents, filming their kids watching the Black Mermaid for the first time.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And they were so happy. And I think this is great. Don't get me wrong. This is amazing. And I think that this should happen more. But then we go to the dark side. So, okay, surface level, everything's perfect. But then, is it? Or is it performative? Is this really the desire of these studios for diversity?
No,
or is it just because
it's corporate shilling?
It's a cash grab first, because it's going to attract new audiences, so people of color. It's going to attract even more new people who feel represented. At the same time, it's going to stir people up because it's a very controversial, a famous character that was white is now turned Black. So people are going to talk about the film on social media. They're going to comment on it. And so this is free, free marketing. And will make even more people watch it, maybe even hate watch it, but they don't care. people are going to watch it and talk about it. So that's okay with them. And then I've read something very interesting, that even though at first glance it seems very progressive, the race swapping in The Little Mermaid was a safe choice because, again, it's
a movie about a fucking mermaid.
It's a movie about a mermaid. She's not even human.
Yeah.
She's half fish.
It's a fictional fucking story.
It's a fictional story. So, of course, it's an original character, beloved character, but it's still safe. It's not really controversial if you think about it. And this is a pattern that studios are doing there.
Betting on the safe things, yeah.
Betting on safe things, but presenting it as being very diverse. And so what really struck me was that they did the Black Mermaid, the Black Little Mermaid. People were some people were angry, but generally people were very happy about it. They saw it as a much needed change.
Yeah. The people who are angry, fuck you.
Yeah, generally, who the fuck cares?
Yeah.
It's a film, whatever. But right after that, you know what they did? They put out, I don't know, was it a toy line or some other thing they put out? And it was with original Ariel. So they put some merchandise with Black Ariel, but it was a temporary thing. And then they went back. I'm not exactly sure if it was a toy line or some kind of show, but it was back to white Ariel.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? You're not doing anything. You're just giving leftovers to those people who really hope and want to be represented, to see themselves in popular media. You're giving them some leftovers. And then you're just going back to what you deem to be marketable, because another thing that I've noticed is that apparently for movie studios and directors and casting directors, being white equals being universally marketable. And that is why it's very hard for people of color to find jobs in the acting world.
So let me say, I am 100% for implementing tolerance in general entertainment. That being said, if you're asking me whether these fucking corporations are doing it really for the moral reasons, no, they are not. I'm not communist, but I will say this. Capitalism has no soul. It only cares about profit. And these corporations, they're for profit. And it's all about making money. If they're pretending to implement tolerance for race or sexuality or whatever it is, they're not doing it because they care about you. They're doing it because they want the fucking profit. And that's basically it. I'm not saying it's useless to do this. I'm just saying they're not doing it for the right reasons. But even so, even if they do it for the wrong reasons with having a positive impact, fine. Fuck it. What better option do we have anyways?
I think the good part of this happening is that it's being talked about, and there are more and more either movies or shows that are talking about this, having a more diverse cast. So at some point, this is going to become the new status quo. So in that aspect, I agree with you that it may be productive. At the same time, I have a really big bone to pick with the fact that the general, cinematic world, and I mean studios in recent years, they focused all their energy on producing sequels and reboots of popular shows because it's safe.
Yeah, that's a different thing,
Because, they know they have, a fan base, and so that's all they're doing. And so they take the diversity idea and they just put it like another check mark on what to do in the movie, and they put it there. But they don't try in most cases to change up the story a bit or actually provide a logical explanation. They just turn the character black, usually black, because I'm going to talk about this too, that I've noticed from researching the examples of race swapping, that in a lot of the cases, in a majority of the cases, it's being done, I'm speaking in recent years, it's being done, a white character swapped to a black actor or actress. And throughout the years, again, speaking about modern times, like the 90s up to now, throughout the years, there were also numerous examples of Asian characters, doesn't matter which part of Asia, but Asian characters as a whole, being played by white people. But I think I only found one example of a white character being played by an Asian person. Only one example in so many so many examples, And this is very interesting too, because in America, I think you have a type of hierarchy of racism. So it's like you have black racism, which is the most awful, the top.
Yeah.
And this actually hides the fact that other people of color, so for instance, even Asian people and Latino people, are also being oppressed in many ways and being judged and so on. But somehow, at least in race swapping, it only tackles the black race bending,
A little bit of a historical pause. An interesting fact. Maybe the number one most brutal racism in the U.S. is not toward black people, because with the black people, they enslaved them. But when you think about what they did to the local Americans when they came there, it's a fucking genocide.
It's a fucking genocide, and that's what I'm saying. And it's not that these people are not talking, but if you think about it, it's like movie studios saw that people want more diversity. But they only have a surface understanding of what people want. And so they're looking at people and they're saying, okay, so a lot of black people want diversity. Okay, so we're going to have these black actors or actresses. But then they don't tackle the other minorities or ethnicities which are underrepresented in media.
They do it as a shallow formality. And I can give you a perfect example of this. I think it was like 2017 or whatever, there came out the live action remake of Beauty and the Beast with Emma
Watson.
Emma Watson,
yeah.
That film was, at the time, I think, not famous for, but, bragged about for being the first film with a gay character in it. And it
What's
was
the gay character?
the character of LeFou. The villain in the movie was Gaston.
Yeah.
And then Gaston had some kind of...
A sidekick.
A sidekick, yeah. The small fat guy.
Here we go again with the supporting roles.
And,
faking representation,
And they made the LeFou guy, they made him gay. And when they made him gay, it was like and he has a crush on Gaston, but Gaston is straight, so he can't share it.
They presented this as a good thing.
Yeah, and the fucking character, the teapot, Miss Potts or whatever her name was, she tells him, "Oh, he's too good for you." Like the gay character that's in love with a straight guy in a toxic, abusive relationship.
With a straight guy in a abusive relationship, toxic straight guy for that.
Am I supposed to thank you for that? How about you fucking eat shit in a ditch?
That's what I mean, and this really ties into the idea that my main problem with race swapping, it's not that I don't like race swapping, and I think that race swapping can be very positive. And important. What I hate about it, that studios have taken it and they use it as a way to put up a smokescreen.
Yeah.
And not actually create original stories about these people of color. And I'm not saying this in a way to say, oh, don't touch my favorite characters, which are white. Make your own stories. No, I'm not saying this. I mean real representation. Because in a way, again, I think it was this Medium article that I told you about by David Titterington. I think it was. Okay. Yeah, he said this thing, I'm taking this out of context, but he said non-white bodies whitewashing history by putting black characters in the place of black actors, in the place of white characters and not changing the story at all. Everything's the same, just it's a black character. You're not only faking representation, but at the same time, you're actually whitewashing it even more because you're making this black person actually live in the context of the white person.
Of the white person.
Yeah, and saying words that the white person says and so on. And this actually erases his culture and his lived experience.
This is what I was going to say. This is actually one of my bullets as well. When you say that, I don't want to tell you to make your own original stories, I would say to that, I would tell them this.
There should be.
Because it's not bad. I don't care if you want to play a character that's originally white. But the problem is, why do you need to make yourself feel better about your race by inserting yourself in the character of a white person? Because don't you see that in this way, you kind of try to appropriate yourself for white culture? And
it's counterproductive.
Isn't the point for you to elevate yourself to the level of white culture instead of just you molding yourself into it?
Yes, and show that black culture, because we're speaking for black people, black culture is just as interesting, just as rich. I'm sure that there are so many, stories.
There are histories.
Whether it be folk stories, histories, real life people, black people, whose stories are worthy of being told on the screen and are going to be not only worthy, but important and, useful for people.
Yeah.
And this is what irks me. It's why are we not seeing, why? Because it's hard. Because then you have to go and actually put some creative effort. And when you're doing the 10th sequel or the 10th reboot of something that's already been done like 1,000 times, who the fuck cares?
This is a problem of economical situations across the world. As it happens nowadays, the core of the entertainment industry, be it films or arts or whatever the fuck it is, unfortunately nowadays, its core and its highest form of development is in Western Europe and in the US, which are white cultures. And this is why they kind of don't have a choice but to try to represent themselves through the white lens.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say
Korean culture, you could say, with K-dramas, K-pop.
Yeah,
so
now there's a shift.
A shift, yeah.
There's a shift, yeah. Maybe in let's say a century and a half, maybe the future version of Hollywood will be somewhere in China or somewhere in, I don't know, in Africa or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then we will be the ones who will have to represent ourselves by swapping races in the black films or whatever.
That's what I also wanted to say about, of course, you've heard of reverse racism. That's something the extreme right really loves to talk about. And while what they're saying is total bullshit, as you said, potentially at some point, it may become the reverse. Mm-hmm. While we are becoming more and more diverse, it could, I'm not saying it would, but it can actually, things can change so that white people are underrepresented.
Yeah.
And they turn into a minority. And so I think this would create another loop, like another vicious circle in which then white people who were once, the oppressors and overrepresented everywhere, they would now go through the path of trying to win back representation, and so this can go on and on and on, and this is fucking crazy.
I can give you a very simple historical analogy with this. In the ancient world, you didn't have the notion of, maybe you did have the notion of race in some kind of form, but it wasn't like in the modern sense. Mm-hmm. People did not generally care about skin color, but there was another kind of preference and feeling of, superiority. And this was based on which was the predominant political power of the day. Mm-hmm. Let's say in the ancient world, let's say the Greeks. At the time of Plato and Aristotle, the Greeks were fucking, quote unquote, racist because everyone outside of Greece to them was a barbarian.
It's xenophobia again. It's not racism. Actually.
Whatever it is, it's just intolerance toward the difference.
To difference, yeah.
In ancient Rome, for the Romans, the Greeks became the fucking idiots who were like effeminate and artists and gay because the Romans conquered the Greeks. Mm-hmm. And the conquered nations of the Romans were like bitches, basically. And then, let's say, during the 15th century, you have the Europeans who were like the Franks and the Germans and the English who thought of the Ottoman Turks as the infidel.
Yeah, and also, I'm not sure if it's the 17th, 18th century, but the Brothers Grimm. Mm-hmm. Like, if you look at their folk tales that they've compiled, there is a very clear idea there that black is evil and white is good. And then again, this does not come because they're simply racist. It just comes from the fact that in Germany, the predominant population was white. So, of course, it would be very natural that for them, at that point, white was a symbol of good, and then black, which is different, which is something not as common, this is the evil thing. So everything evil is black, by their standards.
Yeah. If it comes to like being tolerant and politically correct to everything that's different, I cannot perceive how nowadays Snow White is still tolerated as a type of story. And leave aside the whole thing about the black Snow White or whatever.
I actually wanted to talk about it. It's not a black Snow White, it's a Latino Snow White.
Whatever she is, it's not about her. It's about the dwarves.
This is another thing I wanted to talk about because I was so mad.
Can you imagine how, basically in Snow White, I don't know what was the original fairy tale? But
original fairy tale is, I think, from the 30s. I think it was from the 30s.
I think it was Brothers Grimm, wasn't it?
No. You mean the original, yeah.
The original
fairy tale was Brother Grimm's, but it's very different.
The original film for the Disney classic.
The Disney classic is from the 30s, right?
From 39.
39, okay, so the 40s, give or take.
Yeah, and the dwarves there are presented basically as simpletons. Can you imagine how people who are like dwarves watch this film and how they feel?
But I want to say something else. So dwarves, again, as a minority,
I don't
had
even
a
think,
very...
can we even call them this without offending them? I don't know.
No, a minority, what I mean by minority is that they are not a big part of the population.
Yeah.
And so they're usually, in a way, being treated differently, dealing with judgment, and racism is not the word here, but just people's prejudices. Let's say that.
Which I still think comes into the basket of intolerance.
Intolerance, yeah, this is the blanket term. But what I meant was, so we came a very long way, even in the 30s, from seeing dwarves or little people, as they called them, from seeing them as circus freaks to just regular people. And I think in the Disney classic, although you could say they were presented as simpletons, honestly, from what I remember, I've never actually understood it that way. I mean, they were very likable characters. And so, in a way, that was a shift, even a very small shift, like maybe just a little step in that direction.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you what pissed me off. So they decided to race swap Snow White, and everybody was very mad about the Latina Snow White.
Snow Black.
Which is...
I'm sorry.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, the whole idea of putting a character Snow White and then picking an actress on purpose, who is not white, it's very, I don't know, dissonance-inducing, So, but, it's even more idiotic what they did because, okay, representation, fine, sure. This is not that important in this story. Yeah. The important part is that, so they had 7 dwarfs. And at first they wanted to hire 7 dwarfs, real-life people with dwarfism, to play them, which is great. These are 7 people, there are not many roles for these people anyway, so this is great. This is a chance for them to break through in the mainstream. And then Peter Dinklage comes.
Oh.
And he decides to say that this is very demeaning, but it wasn't demeaning for him in Game of Thrones when he was getting the money. But no, this actor was very demeaning. It should not be done. And Disney, of course, said, okay, we're not going to do it. And then they proceeded to pick just regular-sized people to play them, to pretend they're dwarfs, which is even more ridiculous. I mean, I remember that there was a black dwarf. I remember that. But generally, regular-sized people, yeah. And then, because that was met with backlash too, they decided to make them CGI. And of course, not good CGI from what I saw. Yeah. I never saw the movie, but from the trailers, they just look trashy. And here's a very interesting thing. So you see a person of that minority, we're going to call it. This is no offense to people with dwarfism, but just a person from that minority who has actually broken through to mainstream media and then sees the possibility of other people like him breaking through. And he hates it because that would make him less unique, because that would maybe narrow down his potential opportunities later.
So you're basically annoyed at Peter Dinklage.
Yeah, I am annoyed at him because I see him as the reason that Disney... I mean, I'm generally annoyed at Disney because at the end, they took the artistic decision.
Yeah.
But I think it was very stupid of him to do that.
The thing about Peter Dinklage is when he was, breaking out as an actor, he had a lot of problems with us, at least as far as I know. A lot of problems with getting roles and finding work because they only wanted to hire him as a freak because he was a dwarf or whatever.
Exactly the problem, yeah.
For funny, stupid roles, and he kept rejecting them. And why he got into Game of Thrones. Now, the thing about Game of Thrones and the character of Tyrion, the one he plays there, he got it. He didn't get it because of this, but I think this is the reason why he allowed himself to get into it. The character in the books is a dwarf, but the thing about him is he is written as the character who overcomes his disability and his discrimination that he gets from others, and with it rises up in life, so to speak. It's about overcoming the abuse he gets for being a dwarf, which is basically his actual real life story. So when he took on this role, he was basically personifying his own self, which is why I think he got this role. If I was a dwarf and they wanted to make me play a dwarf in Snow White, I'm not sure that I would say yes.
But you're missing the point because, sure, if you have the choice Like, do I want to play this? Or do I not resonate with it? Sure, you would say, no, I would not like to play a dwarf in Snow White. But we have to be realistic. And in order for people to break through in Hollywood, they usually have to go through roles that may not be their favorite thing, but they need the breakthrough.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at it, I'm not looking at it from the perspective of this is a very good role for dwarves. You know, they're going to feel so represented.
Yeah.
No, it's just a chance. It's just a chance to break through. And maybe then after that, play serious roles. Or roles they actually find interesting. Maybe you can, compare it to when you start at a company, for instance. Usually, unless you have a lot of experience, usually you have to start at the bottom. Or, okay, maybe not as a janitor, but...
So when you say that Peter Dinklage, in refusing the role in Snow White, did only disservice to the other dwarf actors, I'm not sure that that's entirely plausible, because him taking this role for me...
you didn't get me. He actually wasn't offered the role, or at least I don't... I haven't heard.
I thought they asked him.
No, they didn't ask him. He just spoke about it after either hearing about it or watching a preliminary trailer. So to me, this is bitter, because it would have been whatever. I mean, whatever the characters. I am sure that the people playing these characters would have been adequately paid.
As dwarves, mean? The actual dwarf actors.
The actual dwarf actors, because the dwarves are central to the story. They are supporting characters to Snow White, but again, very central characters.
But at the same time, they might have wanted the money and the opportunity, and in this sense, Dinklage might have done them dirty. But at the same time, still, I kind of agree with him that then taking on these roles, which are the roles of dwarves, because they themselves are dwarves, are a little bit humiliating, because they only take up the roles because they're literally dwarves.
But what is the alternative? Regular-sized people pretending to be dwarves? Is that better for, people with dwarfism in general?
20 years ago, Lord of the Rings. There you have...
I know, they were kneeling,
No, they weren't kneeling. In Lord of the Rings, you have both dwarves and hobbits, which are all small people. They're supposed to be like really small people. They hired regular height actors for all of them. And they just used optical tricks, like shooting with the camera from a distance or whatever. Anyway, there's lots of ways to film it.
Ways that you can portray these things.
And can you imagine if Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson had asked the casting team to only cast dwarfs for the hobbits and for the dwarfs in the films? That would have been kind of horrible.
No, I don't really get it. Why would it be horrible? Because, as we spoke about diversity and race swapping as a whole.
Because they're only basing your professional abilities on the fact that you're in some way physically...
No, don't get me wrong. I don't mean that dwarfs or people with dwarfism should only play dwarfs. I'm just saying that I think it's beneficial for them.
They should take the chance anyway.